In this season, as we've been thinking about our mega stuffed lives, the question that I've asked again and again is, how do we make the most of our time? That's the language that Paul uses in Ephesians 5. And what does it look like to make the most of our time in a world where we are overwhelmed with schedules and games and work and responsibilities? And so we spent a little bit of time talking about fitting in. Well, we spent a lot of time talking about fitting in people. We talked about fitting in first our generation, our spouses and our friends, and then fitting in the next generation, our kids and our grandkids. But I want to end today by thinking about fitting in our work. And I recognize that might sound a little odd, in as much as most of us feel like the work is the thing that is stuffing our lives so full. And so fitting it in doesn't seem to be a problem. In fact, it often feels like having room to breathe sometimes is the challenge. There was a movie that not felt appropriate that I watched when I was a teenager called Office Space. And the movie Office Space is really a movie about the frustration of meaningless work. And there's a great conversation about putting cover sheets on our TPS reports and sending the copy of the memo. But I want to share with you a scene with Jennifer Aniston, who's working in a restaurant, I think it's called Chotsky's. And there's a concern by her manager about her flair, meaning the little buttons and things she has on her uniform. Okay, and I just want to play that scene for you.
And
We need to talk about your flair.
Really? I have 15 pieces on.
Well, okay, 15 is the minimum. Okay?
Okay.
Now, it's up to you whether or not you want to just do the bare minimum or, well, like Brian, for example, has 37 pieces of flair on today, okay? A terrific smile.
Okay, so you want me to wear more?
Look, Joanna,
Yeah.
people can get a cheeseburger anywhere, okay? They come to Tchotchkes for the atmosphere and the attitude. Okay, that's what the flair is about. It's about fun.
Yeah. Okay, so more than, yeah?
Look, we want you to express yourself, okay? Now, if you feel that the bare minimum is enough, then okay. But some people choose to wear more, and we encourage that, okay? You do want to express yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's all I ask.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I know how she wants to express herself. I have like some kind of flashback thing happening to a conversation I had with someone who won't be named, who said, why didn't you do the dishes? And I said, well, I didn't know I was supposed to. And they said, well, why didn't you do them? I really thought you were going to do them. And I said, well, you're saying you want me to do them? They said, no, I don't want you to do them. I want you to want to do them. And my head exploded. This experience of work, which feels like it's imposing on us, this experience of work feeling like it is sometimes not meaningful, sometimes frivolous, sometimes overwhelming, is pretty common. And a lot of times it's more challenging than the flair. James Hewitt has some statistics about how Americans self-report on their work experience. And he says that 50% of American workers say they're experiencing symptoms of burnout. 73% of American workers report feeling disengaged from the work they're doing. And 90% of workers report that work life is worsening. Which is striking considering that we are, as a culture, spending more money and more time on workplace health than ever. And there's a lot going on there. I'm not going to be able to, I don't have the answers, and I don't have time to try to come up with all the answers. But I do believe that part of our challenge is that we are failing to make the most of our work time. And I want to come back to this line that Paul says that I think is so powerful. Paul's speaking to slaves, but in the ancient world, like the master-slave relationship is a little bit like an employer-employee relationship. And so we're going to think a little bit of this instruction to the slaves as what it might be for us as those who are working. Paul says, render service with enthusiasm as for the Lord and not for humans. Render service with enthusiasm as for the Lord. So I want to think just a little bit this morning about what that might look like, what it might look like to render service with enthusiasm as to the Lord in our work. And I just want to do three quick questions. The first is the why of your work. Like, why do we work? And the answer is really simple. Your work is your ministry. Your work is your ministry. There's a fascinating thing happening here in Jeremiah. Jeremiah is speaking to the exiles. Just imagine for a minute if we were conquered by Canada, which could happen any day now. We were conquered by Canada, and they took us away, and they moved you all to Quebec. Okay? So you're not even in an English-speaking part of Canada, and you're wondering when God is going to intervene and send you home. Right? And in that season, there are some prophets coming and pastors saying, hey, any minute now, God's going to bring us home. Don't put any roots down here. God's going to send us home soon. And then Jeremiah writes a letter and he says, no, it's going to be 70 years till you come home. So I want you to build houses and live in them. I want you to plant gardens and eat from them. I want you to get married and have kids and help your kids get married. I want you to invest where you are. And I believe that part of the message of Jeremiah is part of the message of Paul, that where you spend most of your time should be where you make the most impact for Jesus. And if you are always wishing you're somewhere else, you will miss the opportunity to do something right here. And so I believe that it's not a huge stretch to say that if your time at work is just about waiting to get home, waiting to go back, it's a waste. But that instead, your work is supposed to be your ministry. Now, I'm not talking about just paid work. This might be whether it's your career or your summer job. This might be the volunteering you do every day, every week in the community, and it might be going to school and the homework you do afterwards. But your work is somehow to be your ministry. And if you think that's a stretch, Paul is talking to literal slaves, people who are literally enslaved, and telling them that their work can be done for God and not for man. So a couple of caveats really quick. Working for God, letting your work be ministry, does not mean you have to work in a church. Right? A lot of people that, especially people who come to Christ, often think, boy, I want to serve God with my work, and maybe that means I need to go get a job as a church person or as a pastor. And I'm not sure that that's really accurate. I mean, I get it. I am a professional Christian. I've said before that means I'm paid to be good. And I just really respect that you guys are good for nothing. But I also come back to again and again this great line from C.S. Lewis who says, we worry that we're supposed to be in ministry to be following God with our work, and what God really needs more than pastors is plumbers and physicians. He needs small business people and janitors and teachers and lawyers. I'm not sure if he needs politicians, but let's just say he does. But I mean, God needs people in the world who are actively working with him to bless the world. He doesn't need everyone to leave the world and retreat to the church. He needs us to be out there blessing people with our work and seeing our work as ministry. So I may have shared this before, but I would call almost a friend. I have an acquaintance. Okay, back up. A little bit of an issue with sweet tea, and I drink a lot of sweet tea. Okay, I drink a lot. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink soda. I just drink a lot of sweet tea. And my wife is amazing and often will make me sweet tea at home, but it's not always, enough. And so let's not say every day. Let's say 6 to 7 times a week. I go to McDonald's and I buy a sweet tea. Okay, and partly it's close, and partly I think their sweet tea is decent. But I've kind of gotten to know the people that work there. There's a lady there, I've shared her story before, I think. Her name is Leah. And Leah works in the drive-thru window, so I will usually see her. She'll take my order as I come in, and then she'll take my money as I pay. And I got to tell you, there are days where I am like worn out and I am getting a sweet tea, not because I do need it, but because I just like need a little bit of a break. And there are days where like Leah changes at least my afternoon, right? Where like her kindness, she's always got a joke. She's always friendly. She knows me well enough that she says, "Oh, it's you again." And I think she means that in a good way. And I have never left there not feeling like she cared about me, which is a remarkable experience in a McDonald's drive-thru. My gratitude for her is such that once every couple of months she'll say, "Hey, it's that season again where they're doing surveys. Are you interested?" And I always say yes. And I kid you not, I come back to work, I take out my McDonald's receipt, I go to the McDonald's survey website, and I fill out the multiple choice questions, and then in the free response, I type in how grateful I am for Leah. Like, she's that meaningful for me. And I got to say, that sort of person sees their work as ministry. That sort of person recognizes that in a simple job of feeding hungry people, she has the opportunity to bless people far more than they expect or deserve. And so I just want to say the absolute first thing when it comes to thinking about fitting in our work is we got to think about it differently. We got to think about our work as ministry. And this is really important. You may not be able to do that. Okay, so I think that almost any job, anything that's not, criminal or violent, almost any job can probably be seen as ministry, but you might not see your job that way. And if you don't, you have two options. The option that I would recommend you start with is you pray about it. You say, "God, like I do this job every day, and I want to do it for you. I don't even know what that's going to look like yet, but please help me understand what it would mean if when I got to work, I wasn't working for people, I was working for you, to honor and love you and to honor and love the people around me." And the other option, if you pray that prayer for long enough and you can't get that sense that you're able to do this for Jesus, the other option is you need to change your job. Please don't spend your life doing a job that you feel like you cannot do for Jesus. Now, you can work in McDonald's for Jesus, but if what you're doing doesn't feel like you're doing it for Jesus, change your job. Because I really believe that His desire is that you are to bless people and bless the world, to seek, He says in Jeremiah, the welfare of the city. Now, the word here isn't welfare, it's shalom is the Hebrew word. It means peace, right? But it's a sense of wholeness, to seek the wholeness and the peace of the city. That's what you're supposed to do with your 9 to 5. So the why of our work is that your work is your ministry. I want to talk about the how of our work for just a minute, because the how of our work is really important as well. Your ministry demands excellence. Your ministry demands excellence. Your job may not, but your ministry absolutely does. And I am concerned in our overwhelmed lives that we confuse busyness with business, and we can waste time in purpose on work, or we can waste time in systems of inefficiency at work. We can waste time because we're bored with what we're doing, and none of that is what Paul calls us to. None of that is working as slaves to Christ in singleness of heart. So I have thought about this often. Jesus, born of the Virgin Mary, spends about 10 years as a child in the Jewish culture. That's probably the window of time they thought about childhood, 10 to 12. They didn't have a concept of adolescence, either a child or an adult, right? So 10 to 12 years as a child, and then 18 to 20 years he spends working with his stepfather as a builder, either with wood or with stone. We're not certain which. And then 3 years as a traveling rabbi, and then 40 days on earth after his resurrection before ascending into heaven. And what strikes me is that the overwhelming bulk of the time that God spent on earth in the person of Jesus was spent as a builder, right? As a worker of stone and wood. And I don't think Jesus thought that was a waste of time. That I shared a Jim Gaffigan thing a couple weeks ago. I got Jim Gaffigan on the brain. But Jim Gaffigan has a little bit where he talks about, Jesus' neighbors having a conversation about him and how weird it would be if Jesus wasn't a good carpenter, right? And so, the line is, well, good thing that Messiah thing worked out. Jesus built a shed for my cousin. What a piece of junk. The whole time he's going on about how he's the Messiah, blah, blah, blah. Well, right now you're building a shed, buddy. But I just can't imagine Jesus building a bad shed. Right? I can't imagine Jesus doing anything that wasn't excellent. And I think if we're going to be about the work of ministry, our ministry demands excellence. Our work brings glory to God because it is a reflection of God's identity. Of course, Jesus worked. His Father is working, right? The scripture, Jesus says, I am working because my Father is always working. And so I think it is easy to not pursue excellence. It's easy to go through the motions. It's easy to be reactive and never ask why or how this could be better. But I don't think that's worthy of people who are rendering their service unto the Lord. Sometimes this means just working really hard. Sometimes it means recognizing that in our frantic culture, we can work smarter and not harder. I had a sports podcast I listened to, and one of the commentators was talking about a conversation he had with an NFL football coach. And the coach was describing the dual threat quarterback, right? A quarterback that can run and throw both. And this coach said, there's one thing I look for in a dual threat quarterback that's really important. And it's simple. We have a tendency when we are running with the ball to put our head down and just go after it. And this coach said, the one thing I want from my quarterback is I want him to run with his head up. I want him to run with his eyes on the field, keeping his options open, not ducking his head and just becoming a running back, but continuing to recognize that he has this larger responsibility in the course of the game. And I really love that idea. I really love this idea that, because I do this myself, sometimes when I get overwhelmed, I just put my head down and run. Like I just figure I'm just going to do more. Like I'll stay up later and I'll get one more email done and I'll make one more phone call and I'm just going to do more. And I'm going to work harder because I just got to put my head down and get through it. And I think part of excellence and seeing our work as ministry to the Lord is saying, no, I can do this better. I can do this better if my eyes are up and I'm looking for my options. Just a fun thing. Will you put my picture up? I've got a picture of some engines. These are literal rocket engines from SpaceX, the company that is regularly sending things to space. And I just want you to know this is called the Raptor. Yeah, this is called the Raptor engine they put on their rockets. And the one on the left is their first generation, and the one in the middle is their second generation, and the one on the right is their third generation rocket. And what's really obvious here is that as this thing got improved, they just made it less. Right? The rocket still makes it to space. It's just not as busy while it's doing it. And so I just want to say excellence isn't about quantity, it's about quality. And so part of what it means to render service unto the Lord is to say, hey, I'm going to run with my head up and see if there might be a smarter way to do this, a better way to do this so that I can offer my very best to God and not just my hardest to God. Okay, so the first thing, the why of our work. Your work is your ministry. The second thing, the how of our work. You do your ministry with excellence. Here's the last thing, the when of your work. Your ministry depends on boundaries. Your ministry depends on boundaries. Even slavery has boundaries, at least in the Christian tradition it does. Listen to what Paul says, and this is Ephesians 6:9. He just gave this whole conversation about slaves, obey Christ, do your work for Jesus and not for people. Know that whatever you do for the Lord. Obey your masters is what he says, right? With fear and trembling. And then he says, and masters, do the same to them. That might be like the most socially radical sentence of the Bible. Slaves, obey your masters with fear and trembling, and masters, do the same to them. It's a wild concept. Paul wants us to recognize that there are boundaries on our lives, and that even those in authority are called to live as though they are not, are called to live honoring and even obeying sometimes those that they are in theory masters over. And I think behind this is a recognition that all of our work needs some boundaries, right? We are not infinite, but the work is. And you're never going to get it all done. And there's never going to be that day where you say, oh, finally, like I can be done with everything, and I'm going to take a week off, and I'm not even going to miss work. Like that's not going to happen, right? Instead, we're called to live with some boundaries. God created work, and then God created rest. Not because he was tired, but because he knew we needed it. And Sabbath keeping, the boundary around work, is an act not of tiredness, but of faith. Right? The hardest thing for me is not responding to my email on a Saturday. Right? It's not that I'm so relieved to get away from it. I'm like stressed out that I can't answer my email on a Saturday because I know I got to answer it later, and who knows what's going to happen between like Sunday and Monday, and I need to be reminded that like I'm not that important, and people are going to make it without me, and I need to trust Jesus to keep everything spinning for a little while. I have a buddy who says there are 3 kinds of work. You know the kind of work you do by when you take your shower. I really like this a lot. Some people take a shower before they go to work. Right? Maybe you're one of those folks. I'm one of those folks. I take a shower before I go to work. You know what kind of work you do if you take a shower before you go to work. Some people take a shower when they come home from work. Right? And many of you guys do that, and you know what kind of work you do, right? Some of you guys are sports players, and you come home, and you really need to take a shower when you come home, right? And we're grateful that you do. I'm not projecting about anything. People take a shower before they go to work. People take a shower when they come home from work. And there's a third kind of person. So I heard an account recently of a church member who went over to somebody's house to visit. The husband and wife were there. The husband was in a stage of his life where he needed pretty much round-the-clock care. And the wife was mostly providing that. And so this friend went to visit them and sat down with them and talked for a little while. And then the wife got up and said, hey, I know this is a little bit weird, but is there any chance that you could just stay here and talk with him for like 20 minutes? Because like I haven't had a shower in like 2 days. And I really need one, and I'm just kind of afraid to leave him for any length of time. And so it would be awesome if you would just hang out with him while I go take a shower. And there are some jobs where you just shower when you can. There's some jobs that don't end when you come home. There's some jobs like taking care of your loved ones or raising your kids where you fit in your rest and your space wherever you can. But just believe me, you need that space. Your ministry depends on boundaries, on saying, even when I am doing work that is all-consuming, I need a space of rest and trust, believing that God can handle things for a moment so I can rest in Him. 3 really simple ideas of what it means to render service with enthusiasm as to the Lord. The first is that your work is your ministry. The second is that your ministry demands excellence. And the third is that your ministry depends on boundaries. And I really believe that we have, when we do it right, the opportunity to fit in our work into our spiritual lives as part of our offering to God. John Ortberg says, life is never about the pursuit of pleasant manageability. It's about joining in the work of God. So I say, like, Thank God it's Monday, because the day before, we celebrate that 2,000 years ago, a carpenter finished his work and rose from the dead, and our sins got paid for, and death was defeated, and our hope was secured. And on Monday, we joined God in his project of establishing his kingdom in our homes and in our stores and in our offices and in our classroom and in our cars and online. And we got to do our lives like Jesus would do them. And we get together for an hour on Sunday to recalibrate and refuel so we can go back out and get to work, so that the whole world might say, here comes the church, and thank God it's Monday. Thanks be to him. Amen.